And now it should work.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Is anyone happy to be here? I saw some. Yeah, that's good. I'm happy to be here. Happy to welcome you to this event. To me, it's a very interesting setup, a very interesting place and time to be here with you to discuss this super important topic of fostering digital pedagogies through international cooperation. And well, first of all, I should say who I am. I'm Piet van Hoof. I work for the University of Antwerp in Belgium, but I serve at the moment as president of the European Association for International Education, which some of you may know. It's a small group of friends who meet from time to discuss internationalization. We will be in Rotterdam this year with our annual conference in September, and we are expecting our largest event ever with hopefully around 7,000 participants, all talking about international education and how we can use international education to create a better world. So I hope to see many of you there. But right now we are here, and it's also really nice to have the chance to have conversations in a much smaller setting. And as much as the things we will talk about, what I find important is not just the plans we make, the activities we talk about, but also the way we talk about them. The narrative is very important in shaping the spirit in our sector. And that's why I always like to reflect on that. And we are here to talk about fostering digital pedagogies. I don't know if all of you know what a foster child is or foster care. It's what happens when a child cannot be cared for by its own parents, but needs to be cared for by the state and by a host family. So yeah, we are here to take care of digital pedagogies and using them for a better or a bigger purpose. And we do that through international cooperation. So we have people here from many different countries, but we also do it for international cooperation because we feel digital tools can be very useful in facilitating international cooperation and internationalization. So that's why I'm very eager to have these discussions with you today. I will be coming back at the end of the day to hopefully go through some of the takeaways of the day with you. There will be a test, so please be prepared. But right now, to get us started, I would like to welcome here to the stage a few people to say some words of welcome to you. And the first one is Mrs. Alenka Flander, who is the local host, let's say, of this activity, of this event, being the head of the Center of the Republic of Slovenia for Mobility and European Educational and Training Programs, the long version of it, or SMEPIUS in short. So please, Alenka.
Thank you, Pete. I'm very happy, also our team, we are very happy to host you here at this occasion. And we were also very happy to see that the topic that is super important, as Pete said already, attract a lot of attention from your side as well, because when we were starting to think about organizing event, we wanted to provide space for discussion, space for exchange of information, space for discussing the new opportunities within the international cooperation, in a way to bring together experts that maybe already have some solutions or maybe have challenges and good practices, so you can exchange, develop, and learn from each other. So we are looking very much forward to today's event. We hope the weather will stay, so you would have opportunity also to go a bit outside. And even though we are just starting with the event, which we are organizing together with our colleagues from ACA, Academic Cooperation Association, where the SMEPIUS is also a member of, I would like to thank our amazing team of SMEPIUS and ACA that put a lot of effort in organizing this event, which I'm sure it will be a success, but as I will not have opportunity to speak from this point at the end, so I will just like to extend really a big thank you to all of my colleagues and ACA colleagues to put this much energy in this conference. So thank you very much.
We will now hear a few words from the Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation of the Republic of Slovenia, Mr. Igor Papic. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly, but he will be talking to us through a video recording.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of a long period that can hardly be described as bringing anything positive. I'm referring to the COVID pandemic. The only exception that I always mention is digitalization. It's education, because I have experience in the management of the University of Ljubljana during the COVID. The importance of digitalization in higher education in Slovenia has been discussed for many years, but progress has been slow. How the COVID situation forced us to transition to online courses almost overnight. International exchanges and collaborations also moved to the virtual due to travel restrictions. Although digitalization has proven to be an excellent solution during this period, it has also shown us its limitations. It cannot replace direct human interaction. But the fact remains that both digitalization and human contacts are indispensable in education and cooperation. We must therefore find a balance. I believe that you will also look for answers to this dilemma at this international conference, so I wish you a successful discussion.
And now we will hear finally some words from Irina Ferenc, who's the director of ACA, the Academic Cooperation Association.
Thank you very much, Pete. A very good morning and a very warm welcome from my side as well on behalf of the Academic Cooperation Association, or ACA in short, and on behalf of our team, for what I think announces to be 1.5 days of intense exchanges and mutual learning on this broader topic of the use of digital pedagogies in the delivery and enhancement of international education. In a broader sense, digitalization in higher education is a topic that has been preoccupying us as a network of national level agencies like CMEPIUS, who is hosting us here in Slovenia today for a number of years. And I think we see our role very much in mapping, in facilitating expert exchanges, and also in funding through our member organizations, the evolving tools and support in this area that are ultimately to lead to the acquisition, I think, of what we call international learning outcomes in a fashion that is maybe not, if not similar, that at least complementary to the acquisition of such learning outcomes through more traditional tools, be they in the form of student, staff mobility, or traditional international collaboration. I want to say also that for us this is actually the second event in this year, public event, in which we dive into this topic. So you can also regard today's and tomorrow's conference as a second part of an important series for us. We started in March in Prague together with DZS, our member organization in Czechia. With an event where we looked at the administrative part of digitalization in international education. We dived into the formats and what that means for administrative processes. And looking at the audience today, I'm very glad to see some faces that have joined us on that occasion as well, that are also part of the room and will be part of the discussions for us to complete the picture. In this event, together with CMEPIUS now in Slovenia, in which we'll be diving, as you know, into the academic component, a very important teaching and learning, the classroom experience, in order to be able to complete the picture, because as we know, that is really essential, and it's at the core of quality education. And as always, we won't do that alone, so we're very glad and thankful to be joined by quite a handful of internationally renowned speakers and national level speakers from here in Slovenia that will share with us their insights and experiences. And we hope to learn not only from them, but also through the exchanges with all of you, from our good, but hopefully also the not so good practices that it's often not so easy to talk about as we are embarked together in this journey of enhancing digital pedagogies. You might be wondering if it's really possible to have a good event in a place that is so spectacular in view. I can tell you it is. For us, it's the second time we are here collaborating with CMEPIUS to deliver an international conference, so we've seen it happen. But I am convinced that what is ultimately going to keep us and glue us together is our passion and interest in this topic. So with that, I would like to wish us all a very successful and interesting event and a memorable experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina and Alenka. Of course, thinking about the topic of today, I do think we are still in a kind of time of transformation or time of absorbing all these new influences. When you think of, the time when there were no computers or hardly any computers, or they were not widely available, is only a few decades ago. Then we started using computers for certain things, and then we got into the age where everyone has a computer in their hand, and then when everything starts being interactive, and when the online reality is shaped by the input of millions or billions of people at the same time. These are very transformational times for our brain also to deal with, and what people say, experts say, is of course we are transitioning from a time where there was hardly anything digital to a time where the digital and technology and data and artificial intelligence will be the unnoticed infrastructure under everything that we experience and everything we do. So I think that's why, but it's also a matter, in my view, this transformational time is a critical time to think about in our field of education and higher education, what we want to do with these tools and what we want that infrastructure to be for. And that's, I think, the really important part of these kinds of conversations. And there are different visions on that, and that makes it, of course, interesting. We will start off our day, well, we started already with some very nice words of welcome, but the discussions on the topic of today, we will start with a contribution from a keynote speaker. He was at first planned to be here, but due to health reasons, he's not able to join us in person, but he recorded for us his presentation. I'm talking about Professor Robert O'Dowd. He's a professor of English studies at the University of León. As far as I know, he's been living in Spain for decades already, for a very long time. And he has already worked in different countries before that, in Ireland, Germany, and Spain. His doctoral research was already about virtual exchange, which is the topic he will cover. And he's a frequent speaker, and he also publishes papers on this topic regularly. So he's a very well-recognized expert in this field, and he's also active in the EAI. He'll mention that during his talk. He published recently a book a few months ago on virtual exchange. It's one of two books that appeared in the last few months. Another one is by our colleague John Rubin. He published a big volume with contributions from many different people on collaborative online international learning, which is a term which will become clear for those who are not familiar with it. So I would like to ask the technicians to start Robert's video. Yes, it can start now. Please give the...
Hello, everybody. My name is Robert O'Dowd. I come from Ireland, but I live in León and work at the University of León in northern Spain. I'm very grateful that I've been allowed to speak to you today by video, as I wasn't able to, I'm afraid. And I'd like to thank the organizers for allowing me to talk to you in this way. I've only got about 25 minutes or so to talk to you, so I'm going to get straight to the point. Let me share my screen first of all. And here we are now. So I'm talking to you today about virtual exchange and blended mobility. This is a topic that I've been studying for all my academic career, basically. I did my PhD all about virtual exchange at the University of Essen in Germany over 20 years ago. And ever since then, I've been studying this fascinating part of international education. However, I'm here today very much not trying to sell you this as a panacea, trying to tell you that this is the solution to all our problems, that this is the next step for international education, and that we're not going to need to travel anymore, and that we don't need to send our students abroad anymore. I am also a product of Erasmus. I had wonderful experiences studying abroad when I was at college, and I'm convinced that this is a necessary part of students' university careers, if and when possible. However, I think that as we all know, many students are never going to go abroad for many different reasons. And we also know that in times of pandemics such as COVID, the options offered to us by online virtual exchange are really exciting and important and useful. So I think we need to explore them. But what I'm going to do today is try to show you, shall we say, the potential that virtual exchange has, in particular for overcoming aspects of inclusion and, including groups of students that wouldn't normally travel abroad. But at the same time, I'm also going to look at the challenges and the barriers that it poses, okay, and the things that we need to consider, okay? So I'm going to try and look at both sides of it. And then also maybe, well, let me just continue my presentation here. These are basically what I'd like to do. Begin by talking about what is virtual exchange or what is blended mobility, because there are a lot of different terms out there, and they can be very confusing because they're being used interchangeably. And different terms mean, they have different meanings and involve different activities. And it's good to clarify, I think, what we need, what we mean by each of these. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about virtual exchange and how it can support diversity and inclusion in university education. But then I'll move on, I'll talk about the barriers and limitations of virtual exchange and what we need to keep in mind as we start taking up this type of activity in our classrooms. And then, if I have time, and I hope I will, we'll look at what steps we can take to promote the uptake of virtual exchange and blended mobility. Okay, so practical steps that we can undertake there. So, a quick review, first of all, of definitions, all right? I think it's important to differentiate between virtual exchange and virtual mobility, okay? These are two very different activities, and we need to, differentiate and understand clearly what we're talking about. And then secondly, we need also to be aware of what we mean by blended mobility. And what everybody in Europe seems to be talking about nowadays is BIPs. And what are BIPs? Okay, so let's see, what we mean by all of these things. Well, first of all, what is virtual exchange? Now, there are colleagues there with you today that I'm sure will have maybe slightly different definitions or will put different emphasis on different things. But my definition of virtual exchange, the one that I work with, and the one that I think captures most of the key points, is that it is an umbrella term that looks at different ways learners are brought into online intercultural interaction and collaboration together with partners from other cultural contexts or from other countries and geographical regions, but also very importantly as an integrated part of coursework and under the guidance of educators. Now, I imagine most of you today, if I'd asked you before this presentation, what is virtual exchange, you would definitely tell me this first part. It's about bringing classes of learners from different parts of the world into online collaboration and interaction together. However, I think you also need to keep in mind the second part, that it should be an integrated part of coursework, so students should get recognition for their work, for what they do, and it should take part as, be related to their curriculum or to whatever they're studying in their classes. And also, very importantly, that teachers, educators, guide and support and facilitate students in these interactions. Because as I'm sure you're all aware by now, we may be all working with what we call digital natives, but that does not mean that our students are good online collaborators, communicators, and so we need to keep in mind that they need guidance, and especially in this very complex activity where you're bringing students into contact with people that speak different languages, that come from other cultures. How do we get our students to learn from that? Okay, that's the role of the teacher that I want you to keep in mind there. Now, terminology. So virtual exchange, like I said, is an umbrella term, but there's many other terms that you've probably heard. Probably the best known one, and one that you'll probably hear a few times in your conference these days, is COIL, right? The one in the bottom left there. Collaborative Online International Learning. This is a very, very common term for one approach or one type of virtual exchange. If you're working in the world of economics and marketing, for example, they will often refer to global virtual teams. And for those of us that come from the world of foreign language education, well, telecollaboration and e-tandem, teletandem are all common terms as well. These are all different, more or less, different ways that virtual exchange is put into practice. And they may differ in certain ways, but I think they are all, we can all say that they are forms of virtual exchange. However, we cannot confuse or should not confuse virtual exchange with virtual mobility, okay? Now, virtual mobility is something that many of you will have seen happening during the COVID lockdown, for example, okay, where students attend classes for a short period at another institution outside of their own country without physically leaving their home. So students would, I was an Erasmus coordinator in my department, and students, instead of traveling abroad during COVID because they were not able to, they were able to register online at a foreign university. They followed the classes, pardon me, online through video lectures and through the online platforms. They studied the content. They did the exams online as well. And then at the end, usually the university, the partner university, sent back the grades to my university and said the student had passed the exams, etc., etc. That is what we mean by virtual mobility. Virtual exchange, like I've been saying, is very different to this, okay? You've got your students, they continue as part of their normal classes. And as part of their normal classes, they are taking part in projects, they are engaging in interaction with students that are in other countries, in other classes as well, and they're collaborating online together. Okay, so there you can see kind of the main differences between these two approaches. Okay, virtual mobility. I won't be talking about that today because it's not my area of expertise. All I know is that it is a very controversial term. As some of the colleagues that are maybe there today will later mention to you, I mean, the fact people question whether it should be called mobility at all, okay? And there's a lot of interesting research coming out about it now. This is just one example, this article that I came across very recently, which are, questioning the students, the quality of the students' experiences by engaging in virtual mobility. Because as many colleagues will point out, going abroad, attending classes is only one small part of the study abroad experience. Okay, you also go to post offices. Well, nobody goes to post offices anymore, but you go to bakeries, you go to shops, you meet people inside class, outside of the classroom, in your student residence. All of that is part of study abroad. So simply by providing online courses to follow, that experience pales, in comparison to what is a real Erasmus or study abroad experience. And that, I think, is what this research published, which has just been published, and others are showing up. Okay. Anyway, next step, what is blended mobility? Blended mobility can be defined as the strategic combination of both physical mobility and structured online collaboration. That means you're combining stages of virtual exchange where students are collaborating online together with a period of short physical mobility in one of the partners' universities. Okay, the most well-known or most common approach to blended mobility that we have now in Europe, thanks to the new Erasmus Plus program, are blended intensive programs, BIPs. And BIPs, like I said, part of the new Erasmus Plus program. And what they involve is, as you can see here, physical mobility between 5 and 30 days, combined with a compulsory virtual component. And notice this, facilitating collaborative online learning, exchange, and teamwork. So virtual exchange, okay? And these blended mobilities must have a minimum of 3 ECTS. And to give you an example of a BIP, in case some of you are not familiar with them yet, this is one that we carried out in my own university, in my own classes last year. The subject was innovation in foreign language teaching. So these were groups of future foreign language teachers from different countries. Okay, it was worth 3 ECTS, and the students were my students in León in Spain, colleagues and students from Bochum in Germany, from Trinity College in Ireland, from Oulu in Finland, and also from universities in Italy and Lithuania. How did it work? Well, we had 3 phases. The first one was, shall we say, online lectures, where we invited guest speakers, and students could log on, follow them, and then meet afterwards and discuss with a prepared worksheet, what happened in the lecture. We then gave them projects to do where they had to work in these international teams and collaborate and prepare a project based on the topics they had been listening to. And then finally, just after Christmas, after maybe 6 to 8 weeks working online together, they traveled to León and they all met together. We had organized cultural events. They finished the projects they had started in phase 2. They presented them, and that's what we all looked like on the last day of our course. All very tired, but very happy. A really exciting and I think very promising approach to virtual exchange and international education. Today's not the day to go into it. There's lots of limitations to these BIP programs, lots of problems about how they're being set up, but we'll look at that maybe another day. Okay, but anyway, today what I wanted to look at a little bit is about this whole issue of diversity and an inclusion in virtual exchange. Okay, so that covers 2 issues. First of all, the potential for the greater inclusion of underrepresented social and cultural groups in international learning. We all know that there are many groups that never get to go abroad, okay? And the new Erasmus program, is asking us to focus on, to promote equal opportunities of access, inclusion, diversity, and fairness across all its actions. And, virtual exchange, I think, can be seen as a potentially useful tool for doing this. for giving students that wouldn't normally go abroad access to international learning experiences. However, there's a second issue I want us to consider, right? Which is the whole issue of the quality of the engagement of our students. So once we get our students involved in these virtual exchanges, how do they engage with the other groups? To what extent is there equity of engagement between the different groups that are taking part in these projects? And I'll try and explain what I mean by that in a couple of minutes, right? I mean, like I said, it's pretty obvious why we can link virtual exchange, I think, to inclusion, okay, and diversity. All you have to do is look at the current rates of international student mobility in Europe, okay? I don't know if you guys are familiar with what percentage of students in your country go abroad, but if we look at the EU average, we've got only 13.5% of students, okay? That's 9.1% that are doing, you know, a stage like Erasmus or something like that, and 4.3% that are actually doing all of their studies in another country. Maybe you can see from that, it's very difficult maybe to read on your screen the different countries, you know, but the big, shall we say, the most successful countries seem to be Luxembourg, Cyprus, the Netherlands, Germany, and Finland in descending order. Okay, so that's it. So, you know, these are so we would say, okay, so then obviously, you know, we should be considering virtual exchange for those students that's 87% that are never going to go abroad, right? But you know, there is a lot of critique in the literature of, you know, physical mobility being a form of exclusion, okay? Even though we have taken for granted for so many years that this is the way we need to internationalize our classes and internationalize our universities. There's a really wonderful book that I really recommend to you by a lady called Sarah Richardson, Cosmopolitan Learning for a Global Area. And she is very critical of physical mobility in this book. She says, mobility tends to be socially exclusive, providing opportunities to elite students to enhance their distinctiveness from other students, but remaining inaccessible to many. So it simply makes the elite even more elite, basically, is what she's saying there. And she calls on institutions and policymakers to turn their attention away from a myopic focus on movement as the holy grail in helping students to gain a global ethos. I really like that. A myopic focus on movement as the holy grail, right? So in other words, institutions have, you know, had only one vision about how to get students a global ethos, how to develop intercultural competence, how to develop global citizenship. And that was send them abroad and let them work it out while they're out there, right? And she questions that very nicely. She argues very strongly for this in this book. And it's a really, like I said, a really recommendable book. So there is now, because of this, there is, shall we say, within the literature and within all of the organizations that promote virtual exchange, a lot of them are now looking to see if, you know, virtual exchange can be a tool for inclusion of non-mobile students. And the Stevens Initiative, which is a very important organization in the United States that looks at this whole area, they suggest that they have found in their data, okay, that, for example, more than half of all respondents that took part in their virtual exchanges, okay, they engage normally, by the way, students in the United States and in the MENA regions, okay? More than half of them identified their race or ethnicity as something other than white, 11% as having a disability, and 30% as being first-generation students. So what they're trying to point out here is basically, you know, that that they are attracting students to virtual exchange programs that wouldn't normally have an international experience. In the summer and fall of 2021, 65% of MENA and 78% of US respondents had not previously participated in an international exchange, okay? So, you know, this is data to prove that students that would never go abroad are getting at least some kind of international learning experience through virtual exchange. And this is something that the European Commission picks up on. And one of the main justifications for BIPs, for blended intensive programs, and for blended mobility is this, you know. The Commission says, at its core, blended mobility creates new learning opportunities for people who could not participate in a mobility program before, in particular students from different backgrounds, including those with fewer opportunities. The assumption here, and I'm insisting it's an assumption because there's no data, by the way, yet to prove this, is that students that wouldn't normally go abroad will, because they can't afford to stay away for 6 months or for 9 months, will be able to take part in BIP programs, for example, and other forms of blended mobility. Okay, that is the assumption. It's also a thing we can look for, not only with students, but for teachers, okay? That there are, many, many teachers that who should be going abroad, who should be, getting a global experience as part of their teaching career and are not able to do it, right? And that may be because, especially those in, shall we say, in rural areas and isolated areas, okay, they have limited access to specialized expertise. They have difficulties attending workshops. There's very few workshops and training programs being organized in their own institutions. Well, in a project which I've been leading recently called Valiant, which comes from Virtual Innovation and Support Networks for Teachers. Okay, what we have tried to do is to organize virtual exchanges that bring together teachers in isolated areas, student teachers in universities of education, and educational experts in virtual exchanges together. And we've brought them together here, as you can see, in different ways. Some of the virtual exchanges only involved in-service teachers, others mixed in-service teachers and student teachers, and others only involved student teachers. But one of the things is that we see that virtual exchange was felt as or perceived as a way of overcoming isolation. Yeah? We're getting feedback like this. Participating in a virtual exchange made me feel part of a wider community. Very high positive reaction to this. Participating in a virtual exchange made me feel more connected with other teachers. All of these type of comments are being, strongly agreed with. All right, so this is, I think, a very positive option for virtual exchange. And I'll let you look here very briefly at some of the comments from the teachers that took part in these Valiant exchanges. Okay, so yeah, I think you can see that, the value of this for teachers that are not used to getting access to international experiences, to international collaborators, to international networks. Virtual exchange can be a very powerful tool there, okay? Virtual exchange has also been seen to be what we would call a safe space for foreign language learners. For those of you that are teaching in areas of Europe where maybe students are not used to using English or foreign languages outside of the classroom, virtual exchange can be a very powerful first step into the world of communicating and using language in real contexts. Again, these are just some comments this time from students that took part in the Valiant exchanges that aren't used to, using English or using a foreign language in their day-to-day lives. It's been a great experience that has made me more confident about interacting with people from abroad. I can say that it helps me practice the speaking skill. I have social phobia and I get nervous when talking to a group. The project helps me to overcome it. So, this is I think, another great potential for this. And I have seen this. I do virtual exchanges with my students every year, my foreign language learners every year. And I can see this eureka moment when they realize that, that they can actually use English for more than simply doing grammar exercises or for writing essays. Okay. It also, of course, opens up an opportunity to give students access to places in the world and to people in the world that they would never normally travel to. Okay. And I think you can see that in the Stevens Initiative, but also in the Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange. They are focused on using virtual exchange to engage students from, shall we say, the Western world with students from the Middle East and North Africa. Okay, that's the case of the Stevens Initiative. And also in the Erasmus Plus Virtual Exchange program that was working until very recently. Again, it was about engaging students from Europe with students from the Southern Mediterranean. Okay, which is again a similar area. Okay, and there's a lot of research about this that shows that teachers tend to visit places. Well, I should read it here. In traditional in-person international exchanges, Mendora et al. Cautioned that faculty often consider the target country most practical to visit, so the safest, the closest. All right. So virtual exchange gives our students and gives our teachers an opportunity to engage with countries that normally you wouldn't have access to. And the European and the Erasmus Plus program does offer funding now for what they call virtual exchanges with specific regions. And those specific regions in the 2021 call was the Sub-Saharan Africa, for example. Okay. Finally, one other important thing to point out, another positive aspect, is that virtual exchange could also lead students to want to study abroad. Okay, and there's this very large-scale study, a very interesting one that came out recently, that showed that the probability of studying abroad goes up from 6.4% to 14.1% after virtual exchange treatment. So, students, after being engaged in international virtual exchanges, want to or become more interested in wanting to go abroad. Okay, and that's a very large-scale study that has demonstrated that. Okay, and again, I'm finding that in another project that we're working with the Dutch national government, where we're finding is that, when you ask students, following my virtual exchange, I'm now more interested in taking part in a physical international exchange, a very large amount of them agree with this. Okay, so summarizing the potential for virtual exchange. Okay, what we have, virtual exchange can be a tool for inclusion. It can be a way of overcoming isolation, whether it's for learners or teachers. It can be a safe place for foreign language learners. And it can open up virtually, students' classrooms to cultures and regions which they wouldn't normally access through physical mobility. And finally, virtual exchange can be a tool for motivating engagement in physical mobility in the future. Okay. However, there's always a however in these things. Challenges to diversity. There's certain problems, barriers that we have to be aware of. Okay. Can virtual exchange hinder engagement in physical mobility? Well, that large-scale study that I mentioned earlier also said that there is a danger that students might feel that by having taken part in a virtual exchange, they have ticked the box of intercultural and international experiences, and they don't need to do any more. Okay, there is a very big danger of this. Okay, also there is a certain fear among certain groups in Europe that virtual exchange could be used as an excuse to reduce funding for physical mobility. And there's a very interesting paper that you can find online, a joint position paper by the European Students' Union and the Erasmus Student Network. And what they warn is this. They say, although quite popular in most policy documents, virtual mobility is an ambiguous and oxymoronic term. Mobility experience is by definition physical and not virtual. If no physical movement has taken place, there is no need to call it mobility at all. And I bet you there's some colleagues there this morning in Bled that will definitely agree with this statement. But what they point out also is that, therefore, when counting participants in international mobility, participants in virtual activities should not be counted as mobile students, but as another category. And funding for these activities should not be taken from the budgets for student mobility. And I would agree totally with this. These are not to be confused. They are not to be thrown into the same box. And we should be very aware of that. Okay. Also, and I'm very thankful to my colleague Joe Beelan for really bringing this up to me and getting me to think about this. Virtual exchange is not also necessarily suited to all different types of learners. Okay. When I discussed this with him and we produced this blog for the AIE, we pointed out that virtual exchange is based on the principles of collaborative learning, okay, which may not be suited to all students, okay, and which teachers may not be familiar with. And also there's the whole issue of foreign language proficiency. Students may feel overwhelmed by the need to participate in video conferences with international students that may be more fluent with them or more used to international communication. Okay, and we have to keep this take this into account. And again, I see this in my own classes, right? This is a really very revealing extract from a student portfolio that a student submitted to me a couple of years ago. She said that when she was reflecting on her exchange with Finnish, Dutch, and Polish partners, okay, and she said, during this meeting, I had some trouble communicating as I'm not used to speaking English, but I tried to do my best. However, when I saw the excellent level of English that the other students had, I felt insecure and didn't speak too much. I also had a lot of trouble understanding them as they spoke very fast and had very thick accents. So just like I said earlier, virtual exchange can be like a great first step into the world of intercultural communication. There are certain types of learners or those that have a certain level of proficiency in a foreign language that may not be able and not up to this, and this may be kind of end up having a negative impact on them. Another very interesting article that I came across is this one: International Virtual Education Needs Greater Support. And Stalivieri is talking here about the Brazilian context, okay? And she says, for Brazilians to make full use of virtual exchange, they would need to first overcome 3 gaps. The linguistic gap, okay, the one we've just been talking about, right, about being able to speak in international languages. The digitalization gap, where there's a lack of good technology, something that maybe some of us take for granted nowadays, right? And the structural gap, the lack of institutional curricular flexibility and support for such initiatives. Because if you want teachers to do this and you want students to do this, institutions need to recognize this work. Students need to get credit, teachers need to get support to learn how to do this, okay? And all of this must come together, okay, in order for virtual exchange to work well, right? Another issue to keep in mind is this whole issue of video conferencing. We've become so used to video conferencing during the COVID lockdown. We sometimes forget that if we're asking students in virtual exchanges to take part in synchronous meetings, in Zoom meetings, in Google Meet or in Teams, that these are, as this very interesting blog points out, they are biased against certain time zones. They are biased against, they are culturally unaware. Okay, students might be obliged to meet during national holidays and things. They are biased against families and busy people, and they favor native speakers, of course. And whenever I show this, mention this to teachers, then they all start telling me lovely anecdotes of, well, almost sad anecdotes of students having to go out into balconies because their rooms are so busy, so full of people, and so full of their families that they can't participate in class and things like that. I'm sure you guys know examples like this as well. And so the lesson here, I think, is that if we're going to do virtual exchange, keep in mind the value of text-based asynchronous communication, okay? Forums, emails, okay? It doesn't all have to be by video conferencing, okay? Now, my final point, this whole idea of virtual exchange being inclusive and accessible for our own students is one issue. But what about how we engage with other social and cultural groups? Because not every 2 sets of students, when you bring them together, are going to be, shall we say, on the same level. Okay, economically, socially, there's going to be cultural differences, there's going to be economic differences, and we have to keep this in mind. And the question of equity of engagement, right, is what this is known as. There's a lovely book that has come out very recently called That School in the World, which has a lovely collection of articles or chapters about teachers not necessarily doing virtual exchange, but trying to engage their students internationally in different ways. And there's one really interesting chapter in there by colleagues called Agreement and her colleagues. And they say the following. They say that study abroad participants from the global north often initially reflect an attitude of coming to help instead of being more receptive to learning from their host communities. So when you're talking about engaging students from the global north, the United States, Europe, with students from the global south, wherever that may be, there is very often an underlying attitude of coming to help, of coming to teach, okay? And you can see lots and lots of examples of this in virtual exchange projects as well, okay? And Betty Leask has pointed this out as well. She warns this in her well-known book, Internationalizing the Curriculum. She said there's very often a deficit model of diversity, okay? Where, students coming from certain backgrounds, they are, their knowledge and their experience is treated almost at a second level, as a second class level in classrooms. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of what I feel are would show up issues of equity of engagement and virtual exchange. I'll let you know what you think, okay? Sorry, you can then let me know what you think. This is the first one. Okay, this is an example from a virtual exchange between students in Palestine and the USA, right? And here we have international teams of Palestinian and American engineering students working together to solve sustainability challenges and to develop a green building design for a Palestinian refugee camp. The designs were judged by a panel of experts in a final competition, and then The Palestinian students from the winning team traveled to the United States to meet their counterparts in America and learn about green buildings in the United States. Now, this sounds to me at first glance like a very nice global citizenship project where you have two groups of students working together to solve a real world problem, okay, which is in this case, they need to design green buildings for a Palestinian refugee camp. But you know, you also have on another level, Americans and Palestinians working to solve a Palestinian problem, as if it was the Americans that, shall we say, that it was the Palestinian problem that needed to be resolved and there are no problems in the United States. Also, there is an issue there of the winning Palestinian students getting to travel to the United States. Someone, you know, might say, well, why not go the other way? Why not why not bring the United States students to Palestine? Okay, so there's an issue here of equity, I would suggest. And here's the second one. Let's read this one for a second, and then I'll come to a close because I see I'm running out of time. An American group of learners exchanged emails with a group from Quebec for over a year and a half in order to carry out various parallel learning projects. Each group was learning the other's language. Okay, so you had students in Quebec and students in the United States email each other at the time, okay, in English and French, learning each other's languages. The exchanges reported to have worked extremely well, and the American groups are said to have considered their Quebecois partners very competent and highly proficient models for learning French. Okay, so far, so good. Okay. It was not until the two groups met at the end of the exchange that the American students realized that their partner class actually consisted of deaf children. So the Quebecois students were actually deaf. Okay. Now, again, you see this for the first time, and the author that tells this story for the first time is trying to show the value of the internet, that people can engage without, you know, without initial stereotypes, okay, without initial bias, okay, and there's definitely that value to it. What I would question also is are the issues that we may be almost hiding the way people are, okay? And if you're hiding the way people are, then you're not really helping to overcome stereotypes at all, okay? I'm going to leave these two examples with you, okay? I'm not 100% sure, but that you could say that these are, you know, questionable in the sense of equity of the way we engage. I'm just saying that these are the type of thorny issues of gray areas that are going to come up when you start engaging your students in these type of projects, okay? Now, I'm going to go quickly through the end. I had lots of other things to tell you, but I'm running out of time, okay? I'm going to leave you with this. I'm going to leave you with a bibliography, which you can scan from this QR code, and some available links if you want to read more about it, okay? Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm sorry, like I said, that this had to be a recorded presentation. And if you want to follow up with any of the issues or the topics that I brought up today, please drop me a line and let me know. Thank you very much indeed. Indeed.
First of all, there were a few things that I was alerted to that I should have already mentioned earlier. One thing is that for today, the plenary parts of the program, including the panels we will have, are being live streamed, and the link to the live stream is on the ACA website, acasecretariat.be. You could alert your colleagues back home maybe, or anyone who might be interested. I'm not sure if they will be able to see the view, but maybe it's better they don't. And the second thing is, of course, for those of you who do that kind of thing, like hashtags, you could use the hashtag, I don't know, it's not on the screen, but fostering_digital_pedagogies could be the hashtag that you will use today to strengthen your online profile and at the same time give some exposure to the event. So thank you for those, for engaging online. Okay, now bringing us to the next part of the program. Just looking. Yeah, what I always find interesting, especially with the topic of today, online pedagogies for international cooperation. We come to this from different backgrounds and through different paths. Speaking for myself, I come from the background of internationalization, and we were always emphasizing mobility in the past, and then we started to think about internationalization at home and so on. So that's how I came, and probably many of you, to this topic. But there are other people who have a background in digital technologies as such, also in distance education, going way back. I mean, there was distance education before there was digital technologies, and then they incorporated digital tools into distance education, but then maybe only later came to an international dimension to that. So what we see today now with the kinds of things that Robert was also talking about, virtual exchange, we could learn a lot from experts from other fields, and we don't meet them often enough. I mean, people in distance education have their own association, their own conference. People in digital tools or digital technologies have their own conferences. We have our conference in internationalization. And not often enough do we meet each other, because together we are reinventing the wheel very often on things that those people have already thought a lot about. So, well, the reason I'm saying this now is that in the coming panel, the moderator is one of those leading experts coming from another background. It's Professor Mark Brown. He is the chair of digital learning and director of the National Institute for Digital Learning at Dublin City University in Ireland. And he also wears several hats in the areas of digitalization, distance education, but also micro-credentials. So I will invite Mark Brown now to come to the stage and introduce the members of his panel. This panel will go on until 11:15, and then I will come back to you with some further announcements. Thank you.
Colleagues, while the panel are just finding their seats, I'm feeling very old, but also in good company. Let me explain. Feeling in good company because what wasn't introduced in my background and may not be obvious to you because accents are a funny thing. I'm not originally from Ireland, and nor am I from Australia. I'm originally from New Zealand, and we would like to think that New Zealand has a long tradition of internationalisation as well. A little bit of internationalisation, and we might say collaboration, but some competition given where we are located in Bled, because New Zealand is a very proud country with many medalists in the Olympics in rowing, and great competitors with Slovenia. Actually, there's a rowing saying that's inspired in my mind from rowing, if you can imagine an image of some rowers. And it goes like this: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think that's quite pertinent to the discussion around cooperation, international cooperation, and the digitization, if you like, agenda. I'm feeling old, and we will get to introduce the panel shortly, but I'm feeling old, and this is unscripted because a keynote there from Robert had me thinking back to almost 30 years ago, 1995 and 1996. I was involved with a good Canadian colleague, Bill Hunter from the University of Calgary, in a virtual exchange where the student teachers that I was responsible for in New Zealand collaborated with a group of learners based in Vanderhoof, British Columbia, which is right in the center of British Columbia. And these learners, these children actually, had been given a computer and internet access by the provincial government. The internet was quite new in the sense of web-based browsers then. We were using Netscape, and the children were being homeschooled. So this was a virtual practicum or a virtual placement that took place. So we did publish about that, so it cued me the talk about the tradition of virtual exchanges goes way back to the early days of the internet. The second reason I'm feeling a little old, it's hard to be at a conference in education today without generative AI coming up. So I get it in there first, I think. Let's hope we don't get dominated by it, but I'm feeling old because 30 years ago, 1993, Larry Cuban, who's very well known as a critic and commentator in this area from the US, published a seminal paper in the Teachers College Record, if you want to look it up. And the title of the paper was Computers Meet Classroom, Classroom Wins. So I wonder, that begs the question, AI meets classroom, does classroom continue to win? And the segue to our panel here is what Cuban was really talking about are the kind of very deep second-level barriers to the use of new technologies in education in a transformative sense. The culture of the classroom, the mindsets of our teachers, and so forth. So that's a question that I'm asking myself about AI and the things that we have to think about, which I'm sure the panel are going to elaborate on. Just to give you a sense very briefly of what we are going to do, we've conceptualized the discussion sort of in 3 levels. We want to start at the micro level, at the level of the teacher and the classroom, given I've just introduced the importance of the classroom. Of course, in talking about barriers, we actually also need to adopt more positive language about enablers, and we will try and focus equally, if not more so, on enablers. But no classroom is an island. I should point out very quickly, actually, the learner is also in part of that micro level, so not just the teacher. At the meso level, though, we all work in institutions of some kind of organization. So we want to then lift the conversation up to the organizational level, the meso level. And then lastly, of course, we all operate within wider ecosystems at the national and the international level, given the focus of the event on international collaboration. So that's generally what we want to do. I could read out the bios of our panel members, but I've already been talking probably for 5 minutes. You're already sick of my New Zealand accent at this stage. So the sign of this panel is if you see the least of me from here on in. And what I'm going to do is invite our panel members to actually introduce themselves. I always think that's just a little bit more authentic and interesting, and they get to choose what they share with you or not. But I'm going to add one last twist. I'm going to ask the panel members to tell us something in their brief introduction that you're not going to be able to find if you do internet search on their bio, something that's not published. So I guess the easiest way is just to go down the line, and as you're doing that, I'll relocate to join the seat. So take it away. Brief introductions.
It's working, okay. My name is Alenka Flander. I come from Slovene National Agency, and I have a background in electrical engineering, but the career in this field ended 30 years ago. Due to my international experiences as a student, and I was invited to enter the EU programs as a coordinator of one of the programs, so this definitely put an impact on my life career, so I guess the technical part, it's somewhere near along the line, but still I have been interested in technical topics, I mean, to develop things, to look for solutions and opportunities. And the thing that maybe it's not obvious from my CV, and if you would Google out, it's that since I'm coming from Idrija, which is my hometown, I like to do bobbin laces. This is something very traditional, and I'm sure the Slovenes would know that the issue. Okay, thank you.
So my name is Inge de Waard, and I work for EIT InnoEnergy, which is basically an organization who attracts international master students for their European universities. We work with 14 European technical universities, yay, electrical engineering. So, and we do this, we support our master students in 3 tracks. Academia, basic getting the master degree, also business, in either startups, setting up their own startups, or their own consultancy. In terms of digital innovation, which I am passionate about, and I hope you will feel it during this panel, we get the startup, the master students who choose for a startup, get them all the way to unicorn level, which means a startup growing into a 1 billion company value. And we managed to do this 3 times already in just a couple of years. So it is my true belief that digital innovation, digital pedagogies make a difference. And so I hear you say, yes, Inge, beautiful sales pitch, but what is your job? I coach all the professors in these pedagogical innovations. I enter into dialogue. Can you feel the passion already? Ah, yes, yes. Related to this passion, at one time I was in Arles in France, and I didn't have any money to get home. So the only thing I could do is look for opportunities, passionate opportunities. They had this thing called toro à la piscine. If you get a bull inside of a really tiny swimming pool, you will get money in the arena of Arles. So I went there. I said, look, I don't know anything about bulls. I do know a little bit about small swimming pools. I entered, and I got the bull in the swimming pool, and I got the money to get home. In one piece, as you can see. So that's me. Thank you.
Wow. Quite difficult to say anything after that about passion about bulls. Well, anyway, I'll try to stick to my original plan is to introduce myself. My name is Márton Beck. I'm from Hungary, from the National Agency and the Agency for Internationalization and other programs, Tempus Public Foundation. I have a background in humanities. I used to be a teacher for more than 10 years at a university. I used to be teaching Czech language and literature, and also Central European culture. And after that, I turned to so to say, to the other side, if you can say so. I'm working in internationalization with international programs for more than 10 years now. It's mobility programs, cooperation programs, but what we are very proud of currently is the Performance Project, which is so to say, teacher support program that we realize with several partners throughout Europe. This is what I'm mostly enthusiastic about currently, but okay, you can set the various levels, of course, depending on the time and space and the successes and the hinderers actualities. And so yeah, we are doing some job in policy counseling for authorities, and also on the European levels with I think quite quite successfully. And on the personal level, things that you cannot find in my bio. Maybe you can find that. Can I say two? Maybe you can find that I used to translate Czech contemporary fiction into Hungarian, but I do not do that anymore. and something about animals, not bulls, but I used to keep hens at home, but not doing. Since we have a dog, and it was kind of a conflict between them, so I do not do that anymore. But maybe later on. So that's it. And over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I'm Lilia Sheniti from Sousse University in Tunisia. Actually, I'm associate professor in my university, and I have graduated from Braunschweig University in Germany, and my PhD was in collaboration with Hannover University. My PhD work was mainly related to assessment and personalization of assessment in online learning environments. I'm currently head of the Digital Learning and Pedagogical Innovation Unit in my university. And I have been recently selected to be part of the International Council for Francophone Agency, mainly focusing in my projects on pedagogical innovation in this council. And I'm head of the regional committee for scientific experts in North Africa for the Francophone Agency. I'm also very active in open education. I have been recently selected to be OER ambassador with International Council for Distance and Open Education. And actually my activities in distance education started 20 years ago. My first online course was on 2004 with the creation of the virtual university in my country. But after this experience, I have worked a lot on in my research topics, but also I have conducted many trainings of trainer in my region, in MENA region, but also in Africa. And you can imagine the challenges that we have in our region in terms of accessibility and availability of educational resources. So this gave me a lot of feedback from my colleagues in terms of the issues that they are facing for delivery of distance education. In particular, when I have co-authored the first MOOC in Tunisia, which was on FAN, on France Université Numérique, with more than 3,500 students, I have actually discovered a lot of issues related to the infrastructure, related to the design of the online resources, and maybe this is a very nice opportunity to share my experience today with you. Regarding something that is personal, I think only my husband and my daughters know that. I had to do my driver license for 5 times. This is actually a 20 years old story. But I think that I'm now driving well my car. So thank you for associating me to this panel, and I hope that we will have the opportunity to discuss our various experiences. Thank you.
Well, thank you, panel members. As you can see, we've got a really diverse and interesting mix of perspectives here. So the less you hear from me, the better. But I do feel the need to share something personal since I've asked the panel members to do that. And I was going to tell you about how my real name isn't Mark Brown, but I thought I'd tell you something different instead. It's a little bit more practical in case I goof up here. I'm colorblind, so hence I'm not sure you can see the red light here, but I don't see it very well if I've turned the microphone off or on, so a very practical thing. We're going to start, as I indicated, with a focus on the teacher without overlooking the learner as being really arguably the person who matters most when it comes to some form of digital transformation, if you want to use that buzzword that we're using currently. What is it that we can do to assist teachers to really address overcome the barriers and to support them with various enablers? I'm going to really be quite unscripted here and be quite spontaneous, so we haven't got a particular order. I think I'm going to turn to Inge to start with, but one thing to just alert you to is my job is to keep an eye on the time because coffee break is between me and you, but we want some interactivity from our participants. So between the questions, we will stop. I will manage the time, but if you do have a question, a quick comment and a question, then we'll structure those along the way rather than just leave it to the end. So we'll just manage the time as best we can. But Inge, do you want to kick off on that question about what we can do for teachers?
Yes, and I'll take you up on your suggestion. Who are the teachers here in the room? Raise your hands. Give a great round of applause for teachers. Yes. And because, Mark, you said we are starting at a micro level, I'm thinking the barriers. If you have a barrier, I'm looking for 3 concepts that are barriers for you as teachers. Shout them out. First one, shout out. Bureaucracy, yes. Second shout out. Low salaries, indeed. Last and final, this is your chance. Time, indeed. I completely agree with all of you because we have, as teachers, a role to be teaching, doing research, getting all the funding in, and we also need to do large and growing amounts of administration and reporting. In that way, an enabler would be that as a teacher you could go and ring on a bell for someone and get some curated AI tools, some curated help in either as coaching or something similar to get your workload slightly less or diminished, if possible. To really focus on the work that we as teachers need to do, either teaching and research, but easier. And I think digital learning pedagogies and innovations can be made more accessible to teachers. So from my end, for instance, I'm doing, well, looking at you, open educational dialogues with teachers to get an AI toolkit ready for them. If you're interested, it's not yet ready. In 3 months' time, we will have this. A toolkit that will enable anyone who wants to use either AI tools for work, administration, for writing funding proposals, yes, nice. Research papers, like high-end research papers, a little bit easier. Yes, I can show you a tool. And even teaching and learning. So just making life easier, and I will get back to the rewards, the money that teachers earn later on meso level. Thank you.
The cliche that sometimes is used, but I think it's very pertinent to what Inge was saying, is if digital education is the solution, what is the problem? Over to you, Martin.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Inge, for doing part of my job, because I also wanted to ask how many of you are teachers. So I'm very happy to see that most of you are. But let me ask you a second question. So you are mostly, I think, teaching at universities. How many of you did have training on methodology or pedagogy during your studies at the university, your own studies? Okay, but you're still teaching. Okay, so but you do not have to finish, luckily, teaching. But this is what I want to talk about. This is what we realized. This is my personal experience. As I mentioned to you, that I used to be a teacher, and of course, I'm not just talking about digital pedagogies. I'm talking about teachers' competencies, innovative methods, and so on. So this is what we have been realizing during our activities, because even though we manage international programs, we have to access methodology and pedagogies, because that's the essence of international cooperation as well. So we have realized that university teachers do not really get proper training, methodological training during their studies. Later on, that's a secondary issue. So if you are already at the university, we have been in the performance project, we have been conducting a survey, and it turns out that in many countries, it's still not the case during or at the universities. I could have, well, maybe I can also ask you, how many of you get support from your university in terms of teaching and learning? So training on teaching methodologies or digital competencies, etc. Can you raise hands? Okay, that's much better. So this is what we are talking about. We think that teachers need support, and we are now talking on the teachers level. I think you need support from your institutions. You need support from the programs. And I also think that you need support from your peer teachers. This is what we are trying to focus on, at least in my country and in the countries that we are working together with in the performance project. It turns out that the culture of discussion is not there. To talk about teaching, how do you teach in your class? Have you ever discussed that with your colleagues? Is it something that is a daily practice? That, okay, I had such a bad class. Do you have any ideas how I should proceed? And it goes also for digital tools and methodologies. I think how should you keep in pace with the quick evolving technologies? It was very interesting to listen to the keynote presentation about inclusion, and I wanted to mention that as well. Yes, I think digital technology and methodologies open space for inclusion and access. But we have seen during COVID as well that there is an other side of the coin as well. And I think it's for the case of teachers as well, that even though you might have access to the tools, how do you have the proper competencies to deal with? In that case, many often students themselves can be helpful. So communication with the students, vice versa, it's very important. And I just mentioned a few things that need further discussion. I think that we do not very often discuss is a generation gap. Okay, as I'm getting older, really, and I feel it's getting more and more difficult to keep the pace with the transformation. And there was one other thing that I maybe forgot, but okay, I'll get back to that later. So, and then we will proceed in the next round, I think, with the institutional level of cooperation.
Thank you. Yeah, in a way, when I was thinking about this topic, I had the same reflection that equip the teachers, the academics, with the pedagogical skills and tools. This is the starting point, I mean, and then the digital dimension comes on top. At least in our national context, I mean, we have institutions that they do provide pedagogical training, but we have also a lot of institutions that where someone graduating from university just start to teach. And in this respect, I always think about myself graduating from electrical engineering, and I would have an opportunity to start to teach. And I mean, I didn't have any knowledge, neither I was interested in this, I would say, soft things. And this is something that, especially in engineering and natural sciences, probably this is not something that you would consider that you even need. And I know that when I was discussing also in my current capacity with some other colleagues from the higher education institutions, sometimes somebody from one field went to for example, to the colleagues from the teacher field, like asking how to help them, but then the answer sometimes was so complicated because it was so highly professional that the answer was too complex, and it was like, okay, I'm not dealing with this because it's too complex. And sometimes you don't even know to ask whether this is pedagogy or didactics or whatever, because you're not expert in the field. So I think it's really important that there is a support given to the academics that don't come from the pedagogical fields in a way that they would feel they can use it. So it's not, so it's ready to use in a way, or and sharing experiences among the peers. This is something that also helps a lot. And here also the international cooperation helps a lot, because you have somebody from other country having the same issue, and then maybe you can integrate it more and easier, especially in the smaller academic settings or national settings where maybe you don't have so many peers from your own academic field dealing with the same issue. And definitely, I mean, the capacity of teachers to incorporate also the digital dimension within their teaching is something that if you want to have a accessibility and inclusion really to achieve this is a must. I mean, otherwise we will be even more excluding the vulnerable groups because we will not include them properly or do not even invite them. So, I mean, just to offer the technology, I mean, this is something that, I mean, it's not inclusive. I think in Slovenia, we don't have any issue in generally about the technological access. We have quite good equipment, the network and so on, but still, I mean, we faced quite some challenges also through COVID when it was just, I mean, we had to use it. But in a way, we must admit that the experience of the pandemic pushed us out of the comfort zone. Many of us that were not, I mean, before we knew that this something exists there, but we didn't deal with that, that this is something useful, that this could be an added value, and I think it was a positive push in this regards. I mean, probably it would be better way to do it in some other way, not through pandemic, but still, I think it put it on the agenda. We saw a lot of added value, a lot of new initiatives, new opportunities, but having the pedagogical competencies and support the teachers in this regards, I think this is definitely a must, and I hope that we will trigger a lot of either good experiences sharing or maybe new projects in this regard, because this is definitely needed.
Thank you. I think that if there is one positive thing from the COVID pandemic is the use of digital tools in teaching and in learning. I'd like first, before speaking about maybe the barrier that teachers may face in implementing digital pedagogies, to come back to the pandemic and to say that what we have actually conducted during this pandemic is not really distance education, it's emergency remote learning. But there is a fundamental concept that can summarize actually the barrier that we may face in implementing digital pedagogies. In any pedagogical operation, we have this didactic triangle, which is composed of 3 pillars: the content, the learning content that we will deliver, the teacher, and the learner. And if we observe these 3 pillars during the pandemic, we will see that from the side of the content, for example, in my region and in my country, we have observed that there is a lack of resources that are digitalized and that could be deployed online. This, even if there is a content, it was mainly course material and not learning and assessment activities. From the side of the learner, we have observed a lack of ICT competencies, ICT skills, and also problems to access to the internet and to have the infrastructure to the equipment to access to the learning environment. And from the side of the teacher, also, we have observed lack of ICT skills, but also they did not have the competencies to design online courses and to deploy these courses on the tools. So basically, based on this observation, we can say that barriers are basically infrastructure, in my opinion. Even if there is now internet in my country and in many countries, but still students do not have smartphones, do not have maybe laptops due to some the economic crisis and due to the settings where they live, and teacher also. Second thing, in my opinion, which is very important, ICT skills and digital learning skills. My colleague asked if you have already a program for training on pedagogy, and so we have delivered a lot of trainings of trainer, but it's still a limited number of training of trainer. It is not mandatory that the university teacher attend these trainings. So there is, I think, a problem in this perspective, which means that we need actually that teacher have the necessary ICT skills to deliver these online courses. And the third one, And in my opinion, it is the most important thing in particular in my country. You know, when the teacher has to go through a kind of evaluation in order to become professor, associate professor, and so on. And the assessment grade is mainly based on research, mainly based on publication, on journals publication, on publication and proceedings. So even now they start taking into consideration some pedagogical production, but online courses, the effort is very important. I mean, I remember that when I have designed with my colleagues our MOOC, it took for us 6 months, and despite the fact that we have already some resources designed already. So if there is a kind of policy, clear policy, to take into consideration these online productions, these online resources, this could encourage further our colleagues to produce online resources and to deploy these online resources. And this is very important, because now students, these are digital natives. They learn through the internet. They learn online. So they need this online resource. They need this access to the content online. They need this kind of personalization and adaptation of the content according to their profiles. I have been a member of a very nice project for distance education for students with impairment, and I have seen the huge needs for a delivery of distance education for students with disabilities. Digital pedagogies would offer a very nice framework for inclusive learning. Also, I'm thinking about women in some areas. They need to access to the information, and I think that through digital pedagogies, we can deliver content and online learning to these women who would like to go further in their career. So, thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. I'm going to break my own rule just briefly and pick up on 3 points before we open up to the floor for a few comments and questions. 3 quick points, particularly from the last comment there. Firstly, I'm very conscious we've started at the classroom and the teacher, but the learner must not be forgotten. And during COVID, my own university recognised just how important it was that learners were equipped with the skills of learning how to learn online. So we actually developed a MOOC called A Digital Edge Essentials for the Online Learner. About 15,000 learners have done that MOOC with over a 50% completion rate. And why I mention it, not to try and do a bit of self-promotion, is learners co-facilitated the course for other learners, because there's so much we don't know that learners actually can share. The second point is we hear a lot about skills, digital skills, but one of the lessons from my Larry Cuban paper and others is teachers are part of the solution, but they're also part of the problem. That's a little controversial, but actually if we don't challenge mindsets, skills alone are not going to change anything. So that's a debatable point you might have, but some argue that it's requiring us to confront and challenge traditional mindsets, because the skills can be learned if you have the right mindset. And then I think the third point, you mentioned these 3 interactions. If you want to follow up, because I like to keep things as simple as possible, we're talking at the classroom teacher level. There's a theory, it hasn't got the easiest of names, it's called the equivalency interactions theorem. And what it says is that at its core, learning involves 3 interactions. Interactions between the teacher and learners. Interactions between learners, and as you said, interactions between learners and content. There are some other interactions that can be expanded upon, but when you're thinking about this topic of digital transformation, how are we going to change those kinds of interactions? They are a little bit discipline specific, we know, because in some disciplines, particularly sciences, there's more interactivity with content. Let me stop. Quick show of hands if someone's got a comment or question, and I will come around with the microphone over here. You've got the mic, great. If you would just like to tell us where you're from as well, that will help people. I thought you were the first question. I was going to do the roaming. Come on, someone's got to have a question. You can have a statement or a quick comment, but it has to be a question that it comes out of it.
If you ask a question, you get free coffee during the coffee break.
You said 3?
I like coffee. So I'm Danica Rutar, professor at University of Ljubljana, medical faculty. And I'm thinking for years now, if we shall reallocate and reframe the employed staff in a way that we include more technicians, engineers, computer engineers, because me as a medical professional, it's a waste of time that I put so much time into getting competencies in digitalization. It's better that I study microbes or diseases. But we then have to employ more staff and coaches. I think, what would you comment in this? Changes in employment of staff, or how shall we move forward?
So what we basically do is, because we have this ecosystem with different European universities, we have a meta layer of support, each of us with a different specialty. And you're right, I mean, you're a teacher, you're an expert in the medical area, not necessarily in digital pedagogies. But for all the universities, all the professors who are involved, they can ask for coaching hours on a specific subject. They choose. So you would say, this approach or this tool, I want to use it inside of my course, but I only have like 30 minutes to give me whether it's useful or not. Let's plan a date, something like that, or a workshop. So I will just share one thing and share.
Just a very, very short comment, and it might not be totally okay, but I think I would be cautious on one part to build more capacities in IT. I mean, to have separate IT staff, because then it again raises problems very often when we see that the IT services, then how do you get them together with the teachers? There's always, so I think the what you said basically is a good solution, to have teacher support centers, teaching and learning support centers, where it's not necessarily an isolated IT staff that is only focusing on the technical issues. And secondly, I think it's still, in a certain sense, a must to develop digital competencies. It's not to steal time from microbiology, but when you are studying microbiology, you still need to develop your digital competencies anyway, because it goes hand in hand. So I think, in that sense, it's the critical competencies in digitalization. It's I think also a must. If you want to add.
Actually, we have a medical faculty in my university, and in Tunisia we have 4 medical faculties. These are leaders in digital pedagogies in all universities in Tunisia. I have been working closely with the medical faculty in my faculty. They implemented a kind of general approach for hybrid learning in all disciplines in the medical faculty, and we get the chance that our former president was the dean of the medical faculty, so they trained all the professors how they integrate digital pedagogy in their learning content, and they have established kind of professional program certificate. We have, for example, in my university, the first national professional certificate for innovation and digital pedagogy at the medical faculty in Sousse. And when the professor and the medical faculty, they progress in their career, they get points related to their registration in these programs. So it was actually the policy of taking into consideration this online production, this kind of online courses was taken into consideration, so that they were encouraged to be involved in such transformation of their programs, and they were more motivated with the accreditations programs because they have been accredited last year. So one point in the accreditation is also the digital transformation.
Yeah, as a first reaction, I think, I mean, it would be, especially after your intervention, it would be maybe good to use the Erasmus Staff Mobility Grant, I mean, and go, I mean, to visit the institutions and to see, I mean, if it's directly within the medical field, I mean, to learn how they started, how they did it, and what are the experiences. And I think, as Martin already said, I think it would be good to have within the university a support center where teachers from different faculties could turn to get the support, because then you also build the knowledge from different disciplines on how to do it, and probably just within one faculty it's too expensive, and maybe you need it for a certain time but not afterwards. But within the university, especially University of Ljubljana, which is really big, I mean, I'm sure there will be interest all the time from certain colleagues, and so I think, I mean, this would be an added value probably to have a centralized support center where you could turn and say, I have this, and this challenge, and as you said, provide me with what I need, and I will see if this is something that fits in what my needs are, not to develop something on your own because you don't have time and capacity for it.
Well, thank you. I think we'll just take time for one more question or comment, and then we'll move to the next section.
I'm Veronica Kloboves. I'm a pathologist. I'm working at Institute of Oncology Ljubljana, but I'm also a teacher at Medical Faculty Maribor in the field of pathology. We practiced digital pathologies before the COVID. We put all our slides in digitalized way before the COVID, which allows us also to have practical work online during the COVID. My experience with digital pathology is that you need a really dedicated computer engineer who support you, prepared all the lectures and communicate with the students. Without this is impossible. We have a commitment for the courses at the university, and also the staff who support us to help us to prepare digital exams and so on. But without that, I think it will be impossible. Thank you.
So I think that's a great segue into our next section, where we're going to talk about organisations. But one last comment from me as I'm just making my way back is this is about educational change. And we have a wealth of literature and lessons from educational change. It's doomed to fail if it's something being done to teachers. Change, successful change, is about winning hearts and minds. Those we want to change have to understand why they need to change and what's in it for them. But I want to pick up on the organisational level, because you in particular mentioned about a centre of some kind. So let me just frame the question in saying that no teacher is really an island. They operate within an institution, an organisation. So what is it then the organisation can do in terms of addressing the barriers and enablers? And you can see how we've already spilt out in our conversation, because these are not artificial, these distinctions. They really are part of an interactive ecosystem, if you like. But do you want to continue on the organisational context?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably, I've said much of it already, but yeah, I think definitely a more centralized approach in this support capacity, because definitely you need experts in certain fields, in IT, in pedagogics and so on, but they should support the other disciplines experts in their endeavor to have a good teaching within the their disciplines. And I think the experience from some other institutions or some other countries where they have this kind of centers, it's very beneficial, and the ways of how this institutional support is done could be different, but still the institutions where the teachers can go there and look for support, how they could, I don't know, motivate students, bring new methodology, or I don't know, address differently. This is something that it's a good examples that I think we can learn from. But I very much agree that, I mean, the first, it's us. We need to be willing to change, not just to say, I have this course, now I want to use the technology and this is the same, because it's not the same. You have to flip a lot of things differently. You have to engage students differently. I mean, so it's just not like a teacher-oriented class anymore. So sometimes that we maybe still stick with that, but with the digital elements, you really need to have a different concept in mind. So I think without changing us, we cannot change anything. I mean, and the institutional support can help, but we are the ones that, I mean, need to do the change. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to mention that we have as an introduction, we have a good collection of good practices, again, in the performance project that you can find, and it's searchable at awards.performance.eu. But now I would like to turn to another aspect from the point of view of institutional leadership and management, is that we think that universities need information, that is, they need data on what's going on in the classroom. And it's not a big brother thing that they need to have cameras in each classroom, but they need information in order to improve the situation. And again, I'm general on teaching and learning, but of course it has a very, very strong focus on digitalization as well. So this is why we thought, and there is on institutional level and in the level of individual institutions, we could see that there are quality assurance mechanisms, systems, and so on. But we also see that it's not general, that these systems would focus on the actual teaching methodologies and pedagogies. So we think that we need to provide data for the institutions, or they need to get the data from themselves. And this is why we have developed this performance assessment tool. Which has a threefold access. There is a self-evaluation dimension of it. There is a peer evaluation in it, and of course there is a student evaluation platform integrated in this. So this system, and of course there are others as well, but we saw that we could develop a concise system in that. It can provide you with comparable, comprehensive data on many aspects of the teaching and learning process, and it contains also the digital methodologies, but also course development, assessment of the students, third mission, and so research element integrated in the teaching process, and so on. So I think this is just one tool that can help the institutional management to three things: to systematic planning of the quality of teaching and learning. That's, I think, a very important thing, that you have a plan on that. Secondly is that you have assessment, you have data, and you have, as I mentioned in the previous round, you have discussions on the topic. So how does teaching, digitalization, digital competencies are going? And based on that, you will see, based on the data, you are going to see where you need to act, where the competencies are lower somewhat, for example, in several parts of digital teaching and so on. And then you will have the possibility to focus on and to further develop the competencies of the teachers. So these are the three aspects: planning, collecting data, and developing further on, so acting. Yeah, I think this is it for now.
Thank you. As we said, education is not one-way process. it's actually a process of exchanging information between various actors. So in my opinion, for the institution leader, there are three main points. First thing, they need to trust and support their teacher. Because in some institution, we still have the feeling, or some institutions still have the feeling, that teaching online is not so serious like teaching in face-to-face. So encouraging teacher to implement hybrid scenarios, to develop online resources, this would enable introduction and integration of digital pedagogies in the learning process. This is, in my opinion, the first most important thing. And in this perspective, the teacher role will change. He or she, they will be more learning designer or co-designer or facilitator of the learning, and not a classical teacher in implementing these digital pedagogies. Second thing is supporting the students. Students need support in order to accept this transformation, but also so that this transformation will not be a uniform approach of learning, but it will be adapted to the profile of the student. And third thing is exchanging and discussing the best practices. When institutions have, for example, an annual meeting to present the best practices in terms of implementation of digital pedagogies, this would encourage further colleagues to implement these scenarios. But in order to implement these 3 points, I think that it is very important, in particular in my region and in my country, to have new spaces of learning that will incubate innovation, that will facilitate this innovation. I'm thinking about learning labs in universities. I have been in a very nice project of implementing a network of learning labs between 4 countries, between Tunisia, Egypt, Lebanon, and Switzerland. And we have implemented the first learning lab in my country, in my university. We will inaugurate it in the next days. And this is a very nice project because it gave us the opportunity to share our experiences in terms of designing innovative scenarios that integrate digital learning, that integrate digital pedagogies. So thinking about putting in place in the academic structures, in the universities, such spaces for incubation of innovation using digital tools, this could be a very nice way to promote further digital pedagogy. Second thing, and I'm speaking about, in particular about my country, we have a huge project about implementing quality education in all universities. And I think that if we target quality education through introduction of digital pedagogy, this could be a very nice way to implement digital pedagogies, and to implement also, think about also sustainable development integration through digital pedagogy. These 2 ways, learning labs as a structure for innovation and incubation of innovation, but also designing frameworks for quality education through digital learning, could enable institution leader to promote further digital pedagogies.
I completely agree with all of my colleagues, because it's all about dialogue. And I also think, from my organizational standpoint, so all of us here are experts. And I'm sure we saw it as the first person stood up. Immediately, people connected and said, but I'm in a similar situation. Maybe I'm in the medical field. Maybe I have similar experiences. So I think dialogue is very crucial, and we try to really invest in dialogue with our teachers, as Lilia also said. And some of the teachers are the real experts. In our community of universities, there was one teacher who said, okay, I'm going to become the expert in the moonshot approach. So like Kennedy said, we will go to the moon in just a couple of years, and all the scientists went, what? And they made it happen. The same thing can be done now with sustainable development goals, with climate change, with all of the big mega trends that are in society when you use the moonshot or earth shot, depending on the concept you use, in your classes. Of course, the difficulty is that not all of us feel as confident. And so what we do is we provide this organizational support, and we cut down costs because we are a support for all of the 14 technical universities across Europe. And they can ask us a specific approach, and they can also ask us, do you have a specific innovation that might be useful in combination with the businesses we need to talk to? Because in technical engineering, of course you want to know the content, but you also want to go to the next step. Digital innovation is not just a concept on its own. Why do we use it? Because we want to change society, we want to create more impacts and more speed, which is why we use, for instance, hybrid classrooms across universities, because then synchronously, international students from different countries, also non-EU countries, can work together on a project, like addressing a challenge from a company. They can also talk to the company representatives. They can also, the teachers themselves can talk in between them, because each of us knows who is a real expert, who is experienced. So we try to create an environment where dialogue is possible, because only through human dialogue, and although I like technology and AI so much, I totally think that dialogue, open educational dialogue, is the first step. Reaching out to Shahira Nuira, who told me this at breakfast, Inge, if you want to say one thing, what is it? And she said, maybe it's dialogue, and she was right. So I'm using it now.
I love that comment around the dialogue and that respecting that we are all experts and we all have something to offer. There's an expression I was introduced to in Ireland that if you're not around the table, in other words, shaping the future yourselves, then you're more likely to be on the menu. So our challenge is to get on around the table as micro leaders if we're not in senior leadership roles. Second quick comment, the quality assurance aspect, a little flag to a work that was published by the OECD last year on quality assurance of digital higher education. Happened to be a co-author, so I'm doing a bit more self-promotion here, but that was a global study of quality assurance. And then the third is the European Universities Association has done some excellent work focusing on institutions, and they published only 2 weeks ago the final report of the DigiHE project. You'll find it on their website. I have business cards here if you want me to email. And one of the aspects to that project, which I was also involved in, was about institutional self-review, a self-assessment, how an organization needs to continually have a culture of continuous improvement, because this is not an end game. Speaking of end games, the clock is working against us, so a quick comment or question before we move into the last part of the panel. Just introduce yourself again.
Yeah, hello everybody, I'm Stevan Čenkovski, I'm coming from the University of Novo Mesto. I'm some kind of this younger generation of lecturers, since I recently started my career in lecturing, and this is actually my passion, but I came to the lecturing from the industry. So, and I think regarding the organizational stuff that we were talking about, it is very important maybe to the university on which you are working on to find out some experts in the field which are working in the industry and working with those digital tools and so on to bring in the university, include in the teaching process maybe, and use in the positive way to maybe somehow share that knowledge of using those technologies in the pedagogical process. But since this panel is on the digital pedagogies, it will be very pity if we didn't point out the nowadays, the new paradigm of artificial intelligence and using those generative large language models, which are now available for everyone. And as a new generation of lecturer, I'm just thinking how my pedagogical process will look like after 10 years from now. And I'm just asking myself, do the teachers will be needed in the future, right? So what I'm doing now, I'm just, in my pedagogical process, I'm just guiding the students in their project work, how they can use that tools. For example, I'm using the ChatGPT, preparing my materials. We all know that now these large language models can be used also for preparing the proposals, for writing a presentation, a first draft, and we can decide if we need to change something in the presentation and so on. But this is maybe the point for which I want to hear what is your opinion on how do the teachers will be needed in the next 10 years, providing effects to the students.
I think we're going to park that question rather than have the panel respond, because in many respects we are all grappling, thinking about what the implications of AI will be. It's something we can consider throughout the next 2 days. But the one observation I'd make is one of the very first major literature reviews on AI in higher education came to a fundamental conclusion: the teachers were not around the table. So we need to be shaping the future. That's my comment. I want to just park that, take one more quick comment from the floor, and then we'll move into the last section. So quick comment, observation from someone, burning issue.
Hello to everyone. My name is Ira Prodanov. I'm coming from Novi Sad, Serbia, Academy of Arts, Department of Music. So I bet there are not many of you that are artists, actually. And I would say that the ChatGPT won't help you to prepare a Waldstein sonata, for sure. So I would emphasize one word in this frame of our discussion, is that improvisation is a very important issue in this area. Even though we are talking about digital technology, we must be prepared for improvisation, especially after pandemic, because we work with technologies, but we are all the time inventing, during our lecturing, the new ways of lecturing. So I think this word, improvisation, is very important. And I would add that maybe in this kind of conference would be very supportive if we would have maybe 15 or 20 minutes of some courses in short music events, even though a lot of you don't have a music education. But some methods would help even to the persons and colleagues that are not in music, because our methods could help in education of other fields, believe me. Thank you.
And that's a great word for us to take into the coffee break. I always think that fundamentally that if you want more critical, creative, collaborative learners, you need to have more critical, creative and collaborative teachers. Of course, the future is unscripted, so improvisation, absolutely. The very last part, I'm going to sort of put the panel on a bit of a spot here, because I'm going to truncate a little bit of what we had planned. We want to step back from the institutional level, as you heard me right out the outset say, we're part of a wider ecosystem, if that metaphor works, or that method sort of conception. And in fact, at the European Commission level, we have a digital education action plan that one of the major objectives or aims of that plan is to create a high-performing digital education ecosystem. So if I was a policymaker or a politician, panel members. And let me add a little bit of, a little twist to this, since we heard from the Minister at the start, and he's not listening, I don't think, so you're on safe ground. What is it that you would tell the politician, policymaker, or in particular the Minister, is required for us to really harness the potential of new digital technologies? Who wants to take that away? We're probably not going to have our final wrap-up, so you need to think that at the same time. Who'd like to go first?
Thank you. I would like to tell him 3 things, please, not only one thing. First thing, if I was Minister of the Education, I would say, first, very important thing, an open education ecosystem. This is very important. I have observed that through the pandemic, students need to access to the resources, teachers need to share their learning resources, so there is a kind of emergency to put in place such a framework so that open resources would be considered as a common that would be curated and managed by teacher and learner. Second thing, encouraging further international collaboration and joint venture with the industry. This would enhance further implementation of digital learning in our institutions. In my university, we have a lot of international collaboration, in particular in Erasmus programs. These programs helped us a lot in implementing innovative programs, innovative activities, but I think we need further international collaboration and especially joint venture with industry to be able to have a new solution for digital implementation. And third thing, very important also, agile legal framework for implementation of digital pedagogies. In my opinion, we need a kind of generalization of hybrid learning in all curriculum. We need also a kind of legal framework for implementation of online assessment. Still now, we are not able to deliver summative online assessment. We can deliver formative assessment online, but summative, we don't have the legal framework for doing that, exceptionally for some, for the virtual university, for some programs, but it's really very limited set of programs, but also setting in place a kind of training of trainer program for all university, all teacher in all levels, schools, primary schools, high education schools, so that we will be able to deliver this digital pedagogies at all levels.
Okay, so I do hope the minister is listening. Yeah. No, but no, but I mean, I would say that especially in our national context, first, I mean, it's to put the pedagogies and digital pedagogies as a topic on the agenda. I think this, on the policy level, will help a lot to push it over. I mean, because we come from the very research-oriented higher education, so this is something that I think on the higher level, if this would be regularly on the agenda, addressed, underline the importance, this is something that would help. And then probably with a financing, I mean, considering all the independence of the higher educational institutions, especially the universities, of their own and their own autonomy, the ones that are funded from the national funds, I think it would be good to have a part of the funds, like the development fund or something that would support the institutional development in developing centers for supporting the pedagogies, supporting the training, supporting the digital dimension, because this is, I think, very much needed, but then it would be up to the institutions how they could use it, I mean, or not. And I think also that in our national context, we need to switch our minds and really to put the students in the center. I think we still face a lot of cases where we have teacher-oriented classrooms, so we provide the knowledge we want to share and then we go out from the classroom. And we don't use enough the flipped versions or, I mean, other kind of learning, which is, I think especially in the digital dimension, it would be learning for us that are not that young generation. We can learn a lot from the other side. So it goes, the dialogue, it's really very much important. And I think this is something that would really be beneficial and maybe solve a lot of our challenges that we see it from our angle, but they are not challenges from the other side, I mean, because it's their reality. So I think this is something that we could do.
Okay, if I was a minister, then I would be very short then, because there's not much time. But I will more or less repeat what you said. I would create a system, a fertile soil for the universities, where they can exchange information on the national and also on the international level, where they could learn from each other. I would support them to do so as much as they could do. And I would be very open to hear from them, from all level of university stakeholders, apart from students, teachers, management, to hear about the needs, about what they learn and what they wanted to achieve in the national, but also on the European and after all on the global level. I would very much rely on such agencies as ours are, because they can bridge between policy, European and national policies, and they can provide access for university people to these policy goals. Because what we see very often is that, okay, policy objectives are very good usually, but teachers, university people do not understand them, or they these goals do not reach them. So therefore, I would rely to national agencies so that the European and the global goals, such as SDGs, would be translated to that level. And I would be also very open to critical aspects as well, for example, towards digitalization and AI as well, because there is very much at stake here as well, so on both sides. So this is.
So Inge, you've got the minister in the elevator. You haven't got long. Go for it.
We need a win-win-win situation from all the actors in society, meaning students getting digital skills taught by teachers who know which digital pedagogies and approaches they can use, and bringing in industry, because industry as well as society, of course, is part of society. And I think there, if we bring in industry as well, we can also add or reward our teachers as well, which we are actually doing. So if industry comes to InnoEnergy with a challenge, we ask them 40,000 or 40K, and our students will solve your challenge. Then immediately the teachers are taught how to create such team-building efforts to address challenges from industry, also from society, of course, because we work towards SDGs. And then once, if it really works and the industry is happy, we showcase it, because it needs to be showcased. And that way, if industry comes and embeds these digital skills back into society, it has an impact. People feel the difference. People know, okay, change is happening, and part of that change is also addressed by digital pedagogies. Yes!
Ding, elevators hit the top floor. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panel members. I hope you're going to take something interesting away. It's time for the coffee break, but I think we may have just a couple of quick notices or comments. So thank you again.
Thanks to the panel.
Can I just add, if anyone wants to connect with any of us, we're kind people, do so, please. Thank you.
Do we believe that? Yes, we do. Anyway, thanks for all the inspiration. As I was sitting there and having a good view out the window, I was seeing the rowers go by, and I was thinking of Mark's words. And as far as I could tell, they were not going anywhere. They were just going back and forth. But I do that reminded me of a quote I really like from T.S. Eliot. It says, "We will not cease from exploration, but the end of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." So that's, I think, the essence also of education. And the people rowing there at the end of their training, they will be transformed somehow by everything around them, by the landscape, by the other rowers, by the water, and so on. So our learning journey is what changes us as a person, I think, and that's also what digital tools should serve for. So that brings us indeed to the coffee break. The coffee break will be outside this plenary room, and you can also go to the terrace on the left side. After the coffee break, so you have until 11:45 for the coffee break, and then we will come together again, but immediately into the small sessions. And for that part, I was asked to share some of my knowledge of the Slovenian language with you. Because, you know, on the back, I think it's indicated on the back of your badge where you're expected to be. And session 1 will be in the room Voda, which means water. Session 2 will be in the room Sonce, which means sun. And session 3 will be in the room Zrak, which means air. So please find your way there at the end of the coffee break, 11:45 sharp. I think that's all I needed to say for now. So see you back after the coffee break. Sitting on stage.